Thank you. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to have you to listen to me and listen to this. And many of you have heard most of it before because it all started in Halifax. It's the first time we did a presentation like this, and it was Judy's courage that made it possible for me. So, I mean, many of you have seen a lot of what I'm going to explain, but it has been refined since then. And what I found meeting other BKs, and I had a presentation in a global retreat center in January, and the interest among Brahmins is so strong for this topic. And so it feels like it's in the air. And I think also that we can see that in the world, many things are shaking. And for that reason, many things are bubbling to the surface. And it is good. Baba said in the Murli the other day that, if we are physically ill, we shouldn't worry, because if we have knowledge, we understand it's all being sorted. And it's much better to have it sorted now than having to face things in front of Dharamraj when we are going home. And so same with, mental, emotional instability, traumas, whatever is coming up, is also a cleansing process. And I think it's so healthy to get to connect with these things and to demystify them. And they're actually very practical ways of dealing with it. And I think also when it comes to spirituality or religiousness, we often carry a load of shame and guilt, which is not healthy. And so I think specifically internal family system, which I've fallen in love with, it really encourages us to deal with our things with compassion. Compassion and with level-headedness, feet on the ground, and then we realize we can actually sort things out very well. So I'm going to do an introduction, and it goes over to internal family systems, but it starts with trauma, because that's how I got into this field in the first place, and they are so deeply connected. So that is why it is also called healing karmic pain, because from Baba's point of view, what we learn, we understand that whatever pain we go through, it's all connected to our past and connected to karma. So we know it's karmic cleansing. So that's why we're using that name. So I will put on the, I will share. I will start with, I'm calling this also, when we talk about karma, we often relate to karma as, even if we are Brahmins, we often relate to karma as if it would be, a burden, if it traps us, it's like a prison. But, and that's why I like to use this picture with the heart in the prison door, because we have to let ourselves out of this prison. And so exploring a new window of understanding ourselves and to discover compassionate ways to support lasting transformation is like the headline for this whole program. And so I wanted to start with show a film that many of you have seen before, but it's worth seeing. And this was one of the things that really inspired me to want to understand trauma better, because when I saw this film, it went to my heart. Because when we look at the world and we see a lot of bad things happen, it can often make us feel, how is it possible? How can people be so evil? Things like this. And we see criminality is going up. But when we see the connection between trauma and very crazy actions, it shifts our perspective, and it opens a door in my heart for feeling compassion, and also a door in my heart for wanting to be of support instead of judging anyone. So I think this should work if I can start with this. So here we have another one. So wait 1 second. I just see if I can get the sound on. So what he's saying is that trauma is not what happened. And I think that's so important because often we identify and we keep thinking and we keep sustaining. But what he's saying is that trauma is the internal response to what happened, an unhealed wound. And a wound can always be healed. That's the point of a wound, is healing. What he also said that trauma can also be the things that did not happen but should have happened. And it means unfulfilled basic human needs. That can also be a burden that I carry without knowing it or without thinking about it. And so karmic burden is the same as an unhealed wound. And a wound is meant to be healed. It's not meant to walk around and feel bad about it. So feeling bad about something doesn't help. It just makes things heavy and worse. So the practical way to look at this is, how can I heal my wound? And then what comes up a lot these days, people talk about triggers. And triggers relates to that we have a wound on the inside. So, and these wounds which are psychological or emotional or mental, they are invisible. We carry them on the inside. We might not even be aware of them ourselves. And so we maybe think that we are okay until somebody touches that wound. And you know, if you have a wound on your shoulder and somebody touches it, you jump because it's very painful. There is no protection. But when the wound is healed and somebody touches your shoulder, it doesn't matter. It doesn't feel bad at all. So the whole point is about healing the wound. But when it is, as long as it is not healed, then it can cause triggers. And when our unhealed wounds are triggered, we make choices that sometimes can have devastating consequences. And so self-harm or self-sabotage, we can think that we are crazy afterwards when these things happen. But when we understand it from the point of, okay, I'm triggered and this is my response, that's a very different way of understanding. Why am I doing what I'm doing? So addiction, also Gabor Mate that was just speaking, his main field is the field of addiction. And he's saying for a long time people thought that it was genetics, that it was an illness, but he connects it very clearly with trauma and pain, that addiction is a way of escaping the pain. And domestic violence is very often you could say outbreak or response to a lot of pain that the person himself or herself is carrying, and it's just passing on unresolved trauma. Murder can also be the reason for trauma. And as we saw from the film we saw in the beginning, incarceration, as it was written, it's a big population, our biggest population of traumatic people, traumatized souls. They are sitting in prison. And we think they are sitting there because they are, criminals. So you put this label on them that they are criminals, but a better label is to understand that these are people who carry a lot of trauma and they need help. And I like this explanation of triggers that also comes from Gabor Mate. He's saying that the machinery and the ammunition and the explosives are all in us. So when we react, all of that energy that makes us react sometimes in very violent ways. People can react very violently, or I can overreact. Maybe you have found yourself react to a situation and you find that your reaction is not doesn't fit with the situation. So the trigger in a gun like this, the trigger is very small. It's a small, tiny thing, but the explosive and the ammunition is huge. And so the trigger, the situation, whatever, it can be a word, can be someone's face, someone's expressed in the face that we respond to, can be so tiny, and then reaction can be so strong. And I wanted to show you this person because I listened to this guy, Paul K. Chappell. He's a fantastic person. He does amazing talks and he explains things very clearly. He works for peace, but he said he came from a very traumatized background. And so he explained that he's raised in Alabama, which is a racist culture in South America, North America, but in the southern, one of the southern states. And his mother is from Korea, and his father is half black, half white. And if you're half black, half white, you're considered black. And so both his parents were sort of, from the perspective of the culture, not white, and so they were looked down on. So the father, he said the father went into the military in order to be able to be treated equal. So the father said the only place you're treated equal is in the military. So the father joined the military, and then the Vietnam War came. And he went to Vietnam, and he was very hurt, and he came back traumatized. And so Paul grew up as a small kid in a very violent home because the father would get fits of rage due to the pain that he was sustaining or having these unhealed wounds. And then when he went to school, he was bullied. And so he said he developed some violent behavior that he used to fight in school. He was very close to being thrown out of school many times. And he said, I used to fantasize every day. At one point when he was a teenager, he used to fantasize every day about bringing a machine gun and shooting down everyone in the classroom. And when I heard him say that, because he's a very good speaker and he works for peace these days, but when he said that, I made a connection with trauma and rage. And it was the first time that it made sense to me why someone can want to shoot down everyone in the classroom. You can see the desperation that the person is like ready to explode because you have so many wounds on top of each other and they haven't been dealt with. He later joined the military because he was convinced by his parents that this is the only place where you will be treated equal. He then became, he was fighting in Iraq. But in Iraq, he changed his mind. The 7 years he was working in war, but during his years in war, he had the realization that this is going nowhere. And he started working for peace. So he left that. And if you Google him, you can listen to some amazing work that he has done. So you can see how someone can make a transformation. And you see the picture of his little boy. He puts that on his website, the Peace Literacy Institute, to show how angry he was. He said, I was in rage all the time because of trauma. But then working through his trauma, he changed. And I was working for peace. And so I was just thinking, it's such a clear example how transformation can come about and how important it is to address your trauma. But suppressing trauma I like this, also the way of explaining that. So Thomas Huber, he is an expert in trauma, and he often explains about collective trauma and intergenerational trauma. And he says that suppressing trauma can be, you can describe it as it's like throwing a TV set in the sea. It disappears in the dark, but it keeps playing the same horror movie down there. So, those impressions that we carry, and then we suppress them in our subconscious, it doesn't resolve anything. Actually, it is like ammunition in our machinery, and somebody might trigger it later on. Or we might have nightmares we can't understand because we have suppressed things. So unprocessed trauma, they explain it that we freeze it. So suppress, throwing the TV set in the sea, or to freeze it. We put it in the freezer. So it's a way of escaping the pain. So the memory, we freeze it down so we don't have to remember it. But in our subconscious, we need to spend energy to keep it hidden. Because the moment we stop suppressing it, it would plop up, like a cork in water. So it costs energy to keep it frozen, just like if you have frozen food, you have a freezer. It costs energy to keep it frozen. And it creates tight boundaries. As a person, you get very limited, and you don't know why, but you keep yourself safe, so you create very tight boundaries. You move within certain boundaries. And this creates beliefs. So we have interpretations, and we think I might think that I'm a bad person. So if I remember my trauma, those are the things I remember. Many things I wouldn't remember. We are very good at suppressing out of memory. But somewhere there is an impression that I'm a bad person. And if I remember it, I even take it on, especially if things happen in childhood. The children take it was my fault. And Gabor Mate explains it in the way that he says, small children are the center of the universe. They think everything depends on them. And so if my parents are happy, I think I'm a good person because my parents are happy, because of me. And if my parents are unhappy, I think I'm the reason that my parents are unhappy. So whatever happened, even if I was abused as a child, the child tend to think it must be my fault. And then the next conclusion is I'm not worthy to be loved. And another impression is, if I have this memory, that no one must know. And as I grow up, I have this attitude, I must always work hard. It means working hard to gain trust, working hard to be accepted, working hard to be loved. It becomes a programming. And another attitude is to think, to be suspicious and think that the world is evil. And also to identify with what happened. I think that I am what happened to me. So this identification is like it glues on me. And I'm thinking, especially when we are students of, we study with Baba, and we talk about the cycle and we talk about Kali Yuga. It's very often, I think, Brahmins say that Kali Yuga is so bad, it's horrible. Many Brahmins see only the darkness of Kali Yuga. And I think that is to do with the trauma that Brahmins are keeping or sustaining. And trauma causes a split, a disconnect. And immediately I thought about, how the continents, Baba have said many times that in the Golden Age, it was one world, one culture, one language. People were in unity, even though we were different personalities, but it was a dance together, and this dance was working in harmony. Or it's like a philharmonic orchestra. Everyone's instrument is very well tuned, and all the players are in harmony, and they know how to play in harmony, and it's beautiful to listen to. But when trauma comes into the picture, it causes a split. And so for me, that is the end of Silver Age. If we think about the cycle, that is the first pain. That's the first time we experience pain. The first trauma comes in the beginning. It's a split between Silver Age and Copper Age. And then it develops into different continents. They drift apart. We have different languages, different races. We look different. And all of these things sustain polarization and conflict. And then we know how the vices come into the picture and they dominate us. So I thought it was very interesting to see these connections. And so what does it mean? So disconnect, first of all, from my authenticity. So it's very common for people to be unsure what they feel and unclear about needs. Because trauma, if you think about what we just saw earlier, trauma makes us feel not worthy. It sustains shame, it sustains guilt. And we think we have to work hard, and we start to in order to not lose connection from others, we don't look at our own needs, but we pay attention more to what makes it possible for me to stay in connection, to be liked, to be loved. And because the world is not in a healthy state, we're not living in the golden or silver age, we're living in a world where a lot of darkness is here and people have a lot of problems. And so I start to take support by trying to stay in connection and be loved by, for example, parents who are not in harmony. I try to sustain their needs, and I lose connection with my own needs, or even what I think is their needs. So that's one level of disconnect. Now, the first disconnect is disconnect from my authenticity. And authenticity is being spoken about a lot these days, especially in connection with the healing trauma. We have to come back to feel what we feel, and we have to start to reconnect with what is really my needs. Because again, if we look at religious teachings and how we try to fit in religious communities, is to be unselfish. And so the interpretation of being unselfish is to not connect with my needs. We become afraid of understanding our needs because we're afraid of being selfish. So it has many different, it grows out in many different perspectives. And another disconnect is then disconnect from others. So I'm unsure how to relate, and there are many misunderstandings. So we can see in relationship between people is complicated. Relationships between people these days is like a minefield. You have to be careful where you step. And it's like a game. You have to, you become clever. How do I become friends with this one? What can I get from that one? So Baba says that the world is a world, it's Ravan's world. It means it's dominated by vice. But we can see how it also, how vice comes through trauma. Being weak and being disconnected and feeling misunderstood and misunderstanding others, this disconnect makes us drift further and further apart from each other. And then we work so hard to try to find love. And in the end, we don't know what love is. And love itself becomes a trade. And then the third is disconnect from the world. So I think this is the most common experience people have today. They feel disoriented, alienated, and people wonder how to fit in and where to fit in. People are, searching. And what we see in media today and people's conversation about the political world is very cynical. So there is a lot of, views of humanity which is not healthy today. People start to hate humanity and start to feel a lot of shame. But that doesn't help anyone and that we can see especially related to environment. On one hand, we are so well informed about what we need to do in order to save the environment. And at the same time, because we get bombarded with this information all the time, what kind of changes, what could save the environment? But we keep abusing the environment because we are so deeply into our trauma response. And so people can't stop eating meat because of addiction. That meat is another addiction. You can't stop spending because shopping is a way of numbing your trauma. So people are traumatized. They on one hand understand how to change, what to change, but that is not possible because of this disconnect that we can see on all levels. And so we are coming out of sync. So I like this picture by Picasso because I often felt like this, especially before Gyan. I can still feel out of sync. But before Gyan, I often felt disoriented. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I said the wrong thing to the wrong person. And I was just confused about all of that. So if we look at healing, it's about processing trauma. And so, first of all, we have to make sense of the event. If we know the event, sometimes we don't know what the event is, but if we know what the event is, we have to make sense of it. And we have to acknowledge the emotions and thoughts that are connected, not suppressing these emotions and thoughts. We actually have to feel them. It is not the same as being re-traumatized. But we need to acknowledge, because as long as we suppress, it has power over us. And then to digest and accept. And the last step is then it integrates. And what integration means is when it gets integrated, it becomes part of the story of the past. And it stops pulling my attention anymore. It's only when the healing is not done that it's painful. Like I had my tooth problem recently, last week. It pulled my attention. I don't know how much attention it pulled. I had pain in my teeth. Now I don't have pain anymore. It doesn't pull my attention. So the heat of this trauma disappears. And then it becomes neutral information. So it's not that I have to forget it. I can know it, factual, but it doesn't cause me pain anymore. That is healing. So when Gauramati said in the beginning, he was in the child in Budapest during Nazi time, and he was traumatized by that. Now you can understand that, but it doesn't make him upset anymore. So what happens when we heal trauma? We unfreeze what we have put away in that freezer. So there is an unfreezing process, and when it's being dealt with, what is the result? The fruit of healing is that there is a release of energy. because energy was used to keep it hidden. And so often people feel tired without knowing why. And I think I've often felt I've been tired without reason. And I've said that Brahmins, they're all souls. Brahmins often feel tired. And I think it's because we spend so much energy to keep these things in frozen. And so when we don't need to freeze it anymore, there's a lot of release of energy. And what happens also, there is an opening. And we see new horizon. We see things we didn't see before, because when we were afraid, we kept everything very small because we had to keep ourselves safe. So new opportunities. So there is big trauma and there are small trauma. But both traumas are wounds that need to be healed. So again, this is a quote from Gabor Mate. He says, my experience was, no, he said, he's quoting actually someone else. So a quote that people often say, my experience was not so bad compared with what others went through. But then he said, there is no point in diminishing the seriousness of your own experience just because others went through bigger events. An unhealed wound needs healing, big or small. And so trauma is an unhealed wound, and healing begins with courage and compassion to face, to become free. So free yourself from extreme beliefs. This is freedom. And that can be moral programming. We get it from Bhakti a lot. We get it from, and when we listen to Murli, very often Bhakti programming gets activated and we misunderstand what Baba is saying. And that's why churning, independent churning, is so important to understand more deeply and just not take it word by word. Moral programming also comes through culture. To the culture, the family, the society where I grew up with. I have many different cultures. I was not only swimming in the Swedish culture, I was swimming in the culture of my family, the culture of the little, society where I lived in, so many colors. And so to get free from these colors, it helps with churning and understanding knowledge better. Blaming has no part in healing. And so that also, this also relates to, that many people suffer from childhood trauma, and the trauma has often been inflicted by the caretakers. It can be parents, it can be close family members who have bullied or abused them different ways. But, and Gabor Mate often works within this field, but he says blaming the parents or the people who did this doesn't help. Because if you keep blaming what happened, you will never become free. Because they did what they did because of their trauma. So it's like an evil cycle. So if I want to become free, I need to stop blaming. I also need to stop blaming myself. Blaming doesn't help anyone, but it's often a response. It's a trauma response, actually. And Baba says, follow father, not brother. And so we get a lot of influence by people who are doing their healing, but are not free from their things. So we need to be very clear what we take in from people around us. So we can, because they can also trigger these beliefs in us. I can't do this, I'm not good, I'm bad, I'm not worthy. All of this is what is called extreme beliefs. And Baba is always sustaining very powerful thought about ourselves. But we are very, in general, hesitant accepting what Baba is saying in our hearts. We can like it when we get it on a blessing card, oh, very nice, and then we put it at home, but it doesn't reach our heart and we don't work with it. And one thing I remember connected to that is Charlie in Australia many years ago when he met Baba. Baba said something that made many people prick their ears. Baba said to him, "You have never misused your blessings." And that made me think, wow, blessings is not only something to enjoy. Oh, nice, I get this blessing. Now I can frame it and put it on the wall. But blessings is something to use and also not to misuse. So I feel all of these things are connected. So compassion and acceptance are key in healing. And we have to train ourselves in developing compassion and acceptance, both for ourselves and for our surrounding. When I develop compassion for myself, then the inner healing can start. If I'm dependent on someone else's compassion, it's sad because that person might stop and it's not really someone else's job to heal me. It's actually my responsibility. And so I need to start with having compassion with myself, because then things start to open up. And acceptance also. And if I have compassion and acceptance with my surrounding, it's also safety. I get less triggered by other people when I can have compassion for their limits and shortcomings. So trauma responses, it's good to have a little understanding of how we can respond. This is called trauma responses. And when we are not aware of it, we can do many things and we don't realize, oh, this is a trauma response. So they are in 4 categories. And the first one is the fight response. So I assert myself, hoping to gain control, or it expresses itself in aggression, balling my hands into fists. Maybe I do it in my pockets, I don't show it, or a knot in my stomach, or crying, can be crying in the mind, or experience that my jaws is getting tight. Flight response, running away, avoiding uncomfortable feelings. Escape by staying busy or fleeing to the exit, maybe isolating yourself entirely. The freeze response, dissociation and spacing out, detaching from reality to find emotional safety. It can also be to retreat into your own mind and having a hard time to be present, sleeping a lot, going emotionally or physically numb. Or the fawn response. You see all these things in nature. Animals, when they get attacked, either the first thing they try to fight, even a small mouse in a corner start to fight, or it starts to try to escape, or it freezes, or it collapses. Freezes, just stands, don't know what to do, or it collapses, it falls to the ground. So the fawn response in human beings is to do whatever others want, to diffuse conflict and to receive their approval. Or forgetting myself entirely, thoughts, emotions, body sensations, and don't feel seen by others. So that can be a reason why we lose connection with our feelings. We don't know what we think or feel anymore. I'm aware I go a bit fast, but yeah, this is how it is. Something is in the chat.
That's me saying, are there any, how's everyone doing? Maybe just stop share screen for a moment and we'll just see how everyone's doing.
Yeah, should I do it now?
Yeah, do now because now you're going to go into inner family system, which is wonderful. But
yeah.
bit about trauma. Any comments, even in chat box or unmuting? So maybe we'll stop share just for a minute, and you don't have to open camera if you don't want.
Can I just do this ready? Because I think the next one is, I just finished this then. Very good. So key to healing from trauma is to own your own self. So this I saw when I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I can recommend. It's written by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a big name on the field of trauma. And this book it's like easy for laymen to understand. It's so condensated, but you get so much understanding from this book. So what he's saying is that, this. So he says the same, that the past cannot change, but that's not the problem, because imprints can be dealt with. He works with people who have post-traumatic trauma. So to re-establish ownership of your own mind and body, this is the basis for healing trauma. And he says you have to work on 4 levels. So he works with people who have come from war, people who have been very traumatized. And what he's teaching them is, first level, find a method to experience calm. Find methods to find focus. And he is saying you can do Tai Chi, you can do yoga, you can do meditation, you can walk in the forest. There are many different ways from different people. And when you find that, next level is to find ways to maintain that calm. How can you support that calm that you start to experience? So Baba teaches us meditation, connecting with Baba. And then he says, do it regularly. Find ways to do it regularly. And then the next level, learn to be present and engaged. So this is going the other way. Instead of escaping, cutting off, which just sustains your wound, to heal, learn to be with people. And the fourth principle, so it's principles actually, the fourth principle that struck me more than anything else, no secrets. Because keeping secrets, it sustains our trauma. And I thought it was interesting as a principle. And I thought for me, it was very thought-provoking that keeping secrets can be a trauma response, and it can actually just keep my wounds sustained. So let me stop sharing here.
Well,
if anyone wants to say anything.
Opportunity, any questions or comments on what you've heard so far?
His name is, okay, I start again. Internal family system is created by Dr. Richard Schwartz. He's a family therapist, so he used to work with, therapy in physical families or external families. And he's educated at Harvard. And he spent all his career developing IFS, over 40 years, and developed something called Center for Self-Leadership, which is like the hub for this work. And now they are teaching IFS therapists worldwide. And this specific therapy form has exploded since COVID. It's really become the leading form of therapy, which makes me very happy because it's very spiritual. And so the key, what you say, the heart of this view is, or this therapy form, is that we are all multiple. And this expression multiple, it comes from, when people have what's called multiple personality disorder. It used to be called like that before. But, and so people were thinking that if you have many parts in you, you must be sick. But he was discovering this when he was working with a group of young people who were suffering from bulimia. And they were talking about parts. And then he said, I realized I also have parts. So his work is developed on the basis of listening to many, many, many clients and seeing this pattern emerging, and he finds it applies to everyone. So he says we have different parts of us that pop out in different situations. It's like we are equipped with different personalities inside. And I think you can relate to it in the sense that when you meet different people, you may feel that a different side of your personality jumps out and take the lead. So you can be with someone in the morning, and then you go and meet someone an hour later, someone else an hour later, and a very different parts of you come out and meets with that person. And so we can say that we all have an inner family, and maybe we can call them sanskars in a way. So when Baba talks about sanskars, I feel it relates to that. I'm not saying it 100% yet because I'm still trying to figure that out. But when Baba talks about sanskars, it definitely does relate to part. Exactly how, I'm still wondering. But what's clear is that they are all originally harmonious, balanced, and happy, which also correlates with what Baba is telling us, that we started harmonious, balanced, and happy. We were divine beings. And so if we think about different parts, you can think of yourself like a paradise, a garden inside. So you started out with a garden inside of you with so many different flowers, so many different personalities, but they were all perfect and all in bloom and all blossoming and giving their best. So this is the idea that it was all divine from the beginning. And some of these parts, they can be seen like children, small children. They are curious, they are creative, open, enthusiastic, and delightful. And they are also the most sensitive and vulnerable parts. And so when we moved into a world where pain came into the picture, when these parts were hurt, they have extreme emotions of shame, of guilt, anxiety, of rage. And so you can imagine beginning of Copper Age. This begins for the first time. But then this then repeats many, many times in this life. Also, our very vulnerable parts, when they are hurt, is very, very strong feelings. And we reject feelings we cannot handle. Especially if we think about the culture we're living in now. It's a very harsh culture, and we often hear that we just, I mean, what he is saying, actually, this comes also from Richard Schwartz. He's saying in the American culture is extremely harsh, and you should, why do you still mull over that? Why are you still thinking about this? Move on, forget it. Why are you still? So people are, they think, and I think it's all like this in the Western world, that we get to hear that it's about willpower. We can change if we just have willpower enough. We can do anything. It's all dependent on willpower. And this attitude makes us very harsh. And so that results in us rejecting these feelings instead of dealing with them, instead of taking care of them. And so these parts of us that gets so hurt, they are exiled. So we call them exiles. They get locked up in dungeons. We suppress them. So they're sitting in the dungeons of our subconscious with suppressed experiences and again these extreme beliefs. And I think extreme beliefs is so important to underline, because extreme beliefs sustains guilt and shame. So we have to do something about these extreme beliefs. And so extreme beliefs, you can say it's the karmic pain and it's the burden that these parts carry. I'm a bad person, it was my fault, I'm not worthy to be loved, no one must know, I must always work hard or the world is evil. Well, you heard it before. And so over time we have built very powerful defenses. And so these defenses, these are our ego parts. And so when we think about ego, we often feel shame. Oh, I have so much ego. Or we say about other people, wow, he has the ego like a tower. So we also shame others for their egos. But if we understand ego from a different perspective, we will see that our egos are actually our own stronger parts that take on protector roles to save us from the pain that we are suppressing in our dungeons. And also the pain that we experience in daily life for avoiding pain. So you can imagine this guy on this picture, he's not born with his red cape, but he's taking on this red cape. So if you think back on the earlier picture, all our parts were originally divine. So they were all clean, harmonious, and pure. But when the system gets hurt and shaken, then the system starts to reorganize itself. So we suppress the sensitive hurt parts in the dungeons. We don't want to feel them. And then stronger parts, they take on these red capes and they start to patrol the surface of our mind. And then can take on roles like managers and controllers. And the managing, controlling parts, they are looking ahead to prevent triggers. What can trigger our bad feelings? So they plan ahead. So we can develop, and it means also that we can have very good, we can be very good at planning ahead. It's not bad to plan ahead. It's more to understand the connection with protecting ourselves and how it connects to ego. And so I want to remove this shame connection with ego, that ego is something to feel shamed about. It's more to understand, oh, he's a protector. And these protecting parts, these stronger parts, they are actually children. And they take on these roles. They're also children, but they are stronger children. So just in a family, you can imagine in a family, if the parents disappear, then the eldest children, they will take on the managing role, like parent role, even though they are not equipped for it, but they'll do as good as they can. So it's the same here. These parts, they do it the best they can, but they're not really equipped for it, and I'll come back to it later. So these are manager types, and they can be manager of an office, the one who manages all the taking care of all the details. So it can be a typical manager part can be a critic. And it keeps reminding me of my mistakes. It points out my weaknesses, even finds fault in me and in others. So it's my inner critic. Or I can have an inner policeman who is controlling and fixing situations. I can have an inner commander, which is directing, but can also be bullying. I can have an inner teacher that knows best and is a perfectionist, trying to teach everyone else. I can have an inner big brother. I can have an overthinker, an analyst who tries to figure everything out. Or even managing can be a caretaker to save others, to take care of everyone else, and neglecting the self can also be an expression of this protective attitude. So it looks good on one hand, but you can see when it neglects the self, and think it has to save. So it's based on these beliefs and based on suppressing the pain. So the inner critic tries to save you from more shame and guilt. But the way it does it is to keep shaming you. But it doesn't realize this. So my inner critic, and I'm very good at being self-critical still, it comes up strong sometimes. And so its intention is to save me. But it does so by repeating, maybe the voice of my father or my brother or my mother from things. So it's using memories from the past. But the intention is so that I'm not shamed and get guilty in the future. So it's very important to understand that the intention of my parts, of my egos, is to protect me. And that for me was a big eye-opener. I found it so interesting. So the critic is also belonging to the managers because it's preventive. And then you have another level. So we say exiles. You have managers, different kind of protectors that are managers. And then this is another level of protectors, and they are called firefighters. And the firefighters, they come in when the reaction has already blown up. Because you can't, however the managers try to prevent the exiles from being triggered, they cannot always manage that, and so it will happen. And so when you get triggered and the strong feelings come up, then the firefighters come in, and they come in, the only purpose of the firefighters is to cool the flames now and at any cost. So they just come in now and at any cost. They don't stand and say, who started this fire? What a stupid idea. They just said, hold, put the water on and get out the fire. And so their intention is to save you now and at any cost. But they have no sense of consequences, these parts in me. And so how it plays out is that it acts on impulse. I'm acting on impulse when this is activated in myself. And so I can binge eating. I can disappear into fantasy land. I can act on compulsion. I can act on obsession. It's like I can obsess over something. I watched 5 films in a row. I can read about I've been obsessed many times. I studied Mozart, I studied Chaplin, and I realized afterwards why I must study all these books, reading, seeing all these films. Well, it was a firefighter taking me away from situations. It can be distraction, dissociation. It can also play out as violence and is self-harm and addiction and destroyer. You heard about famous people who are destroying a hotel room. So they are very triggered and they destroy a whole hotel room, and afterwards they have to pay the cost for all of that. But there was some kind of a release at that time, but it wasn't very helpful, but it was a typical firefighter reaction. And then they say at the top of them, the one who is sitting at the top is the one who makes you make suicide. Because suicide, I think, when people commit suicide, they never think I'm going to die. The only intention is to escape. It's a road to escape, even if it's just temporary. So the firefighter makes you escape the flames. And so you can see in addiction, and I think we're all addicted. I just made this picture. I'm having him use the severe kind of addiction where you take what's it called, a syringe, when you give yourself some heavy dose of whatever it is that people get addicted, heroin or whatever. But it can be other things. But the principle of addiction is that when you feel bad, the firefighter comes in to give you a shot or whatever it is to make you lift over the flames. You fly over the flames so you don't need to feel bad, but you can't be up there for all the time. You will come back, and when you come back, what you have done have made other people upset very often, or you feel sick because you abused your body, and so you feel bad afterwards, and then your critic comes up, and the critic makes you feel so bad that the exile is again feeling horrible, and then again another firefighter comes in, and so it becomes an evil cycle. So this is what people who are deep in addiction, they recognize this and they say, yes, this is what it is. And you often see that people who go deeply into addiction is very sensitive people. And so protectors, they are parentified children. They are not meant to protect us, but it has become like that from Copper Age onwards. And so they carry a burden, all of these protectors with the intention to help us, all our different egos, they really try to help us, but they're also very tired. And it's not their real nature. They are not in their own self when they're doing that. They are out on a different ground to help us. So our inner world is a very refined and delicate inner ecosystem. And this is, I find, very important to understand, because this helps me to understand that I need compassion, I need to be careful step by step when I help myself. I cannot be harsh with myself and say, you should change now. I have to be up at Amrit Vela, or you were bad, you didn't read the Murli. All of these things will never help. But this is the critic, which is just programmed to think in this way. This is the moralistic thinking. You should follow Srimat. You're very bad if you don't follow Srimat. It doesn't help. I need to understand my inner world is a very delicate ecosystem. And when we understand parts, we start to see that. So the key in working within a family systems method is that we have to use compassion, and we have to be respectful, and we must ask for permission. We cannot just go in there and try to change our inner world. We don't have the right to just go in and change things. So when we think, and often misunderstanding, I think, for Brahmins, when we talk about these protectors, these ego parts, we cannot tell them that now I don't need you anymore, because now I am coming back. I'll tell you more why I would think like that, because they are necessary. They are not to go out of the picture. It's about letting them go back into their harmonious parts. So actually, when I discussed with Judy, it was about having an exercise here to visit your inner family, but I don't think it fits here anymore. Because as I was planning this morning, and I was using the book, I saw you actually need the full picture before you do a meditation, otherwise there's something missing. So I skip this. I want to introduce the most important part of this inner family first, and that is what we call the self. And not to now create a misunderstanding, because all the other parts are actually parts of me. But then what happened when Dick Schwartz was working with his clients? He was surprised to find that there were always some point that a part would emerge that was very confident, very calm, very compassionate, understanding, and understood how to help the other parts. And he would be surprised and say, "No, who is this part?" Because when you work, you learn to name your parts. You sort of identify them, what they are doing. And then people would say, "Well, it's not really a part, it's more me." And so he gave it the name the self with a big S, because this part had only positive qualities. And so what I realize is that it's like he discovered soul consciousness through another window. Because this part, and he would name it with 8 C's, it has these 8 qualities of curiosity, compassion, confidence, it has clarity, calmness, creativity, knows how to connect. It's connected by out of nature and is naturally courageous. And so internal family systems is based on the whole. When this emerged, then the whole purpose of the therapy is then based on helping people to develop what is called self-leadership. So to allow the self to take the lead in healing the inner system and re-establish harmony. And so Baba is teaching us, he says, become soul conscious. And then we connect with Baba to fill ourselves with new power. So in internal family system, God doesn't exist yet, who knows? But Richard Schwartz, who developed this system, he said he was so surprised when this emerged, but he was also very happy, of course. But he said, I was so surprised because I come from a total, what is it called when you don't believe in, atheist family. Came from an atheist family. His father was a well-known scientist, deeply into atheist, not religious at all. So he said, I had this heavy background of atheism. And then I just come across spirituality and I become spiritual. And so we learn self-mastery. Baba is teaching us to become masters of ourselves. So I see just this the same principle. So an overview is, I can move this. I think you see all this. I don't see all it. But so if you want to see the map of it, you have the managers who are proactive. You have the firefighters who are reactive. You have the exiles who are the vulnerable parts, who hold the traumas and pain and shame. And then you have the self, the you part that is not a part. It's like the core of you. And what he's saying is that this part is undamaged and it's hiding under the surface. But then in the training so the whole idea is to learn to get to know how to let that part emerge, and he called it give it space. And he's doing that by connecting with the different parts and having a dialogue. So asking the other parts for permission to give space to this self part to emerge, and then you navigate yourself to healing. Let's see where I'm at now. Oh, sorry. I don't know where I'm coming now. Let's see. Yeah. And so you maybe have seen this film, The Lord of the Rings. And if you have seen it, you will understand why I choose this picture. Because the whole story of The Lord of the Rings is the return of the king. And if you know the story, you also know how he is not, he is able to be to come back but he's himself been in exile. So he's an exiled ranger. And he has to do all of this work to return back. So it's like the healing part has to come back and sit on the throne. But he's also having many doubts because he's thinking, well, my ancestor made this huge mistake that made the fall of the kingdom. And his blood is in my veins. So how could I will have the same weakness. And it's symbolizing how we listen to the story of our own fall from Copper Age onwards, and we doubt ourselves. And this is how Maya comes in. Maya's main weapon is to throw in doubts. And then we understand, if we understand the weapon, then we understand, I have to develop faith. Faith in myself, faith in drama, faith in Baba. And so the key in working with this therapy is to develop compassion, humility, and respect. So when I work with my parts, and here I like symbols. So I see the self is like Aragorn kneeling in front of his little part, kneeling in front of his part and asking for permission. So when you go into your system to start to help your exiled parts to be healed, you can use a therapist for that. If you want to try to use IFS, many people will go to a therapist for that. But some people are equipped to do it for themselves. But when you go in, you never go straight to an exiled part. And you would meet your protectors first of all. And you would ask for permission always when you go in. And if you feel resistance, you would understand that the resistance that you are feeling is the protective part that is not feeling confident. And then you don't push through, but you start to connect with that part and it's like you reestablish relationship with your own inner system that has become split. So you can see how we have to reestablish relationships. Is like mending the split that has happened in our own system. And so self asks the protector for permission to connect with an exile. This is very beautiful. This is like, in a nutshell, how the whole therapy works. And so feelings and beliefs of parts, they blend in. And we are colored by their burdens. So our parts, they carry burdens of fear, anger, dissociation. So when we get afraid, it's a part of me that is coloring my experience. And I think I'm afraid. But it's a part of me that carries that fear. Or a part of me carries anger. And now I feel both afraid and angry at the same time. Of course, it's not that I deny my anger and my fear, but the important thing is to understand it's connected to trauma that is connected to a part of me. And so the point is, ask for space is to unblend, and then the self emerges, and you can say it's a way of saying to become soul conscious. When I become soul conscious, I can experience the relief of not being upset anymore. I feel the relief of not being angry anymore. So the parts are giving me space. So it's just an interesting way of looking at becoming soul conscious. So now I was thinking of exercise, and actually, unblending and emerging self, but then I changed my mind again. It's part of it, but I was thinking I was actually using the first meditation exercise from the book, which I now rewrote a little bit according to my understanding being a Brahmin.
Do you
And
think
so,
that this
yeah,
would be a moment for us to do a little bio break and move our
definitely,
bodies for five,
definitely,
6 minutes, and then we come back?
definitely, very good for me
Then
too.
we're ready to dive in. And so you're going to do a meditation with us,
Yes, yes,
and we will meet a protector, which is kind of cool. And then
yeah,
we'll like be Aragon going in to get on our knee and say hello. Who are
yes,
Can I just ask a question? Is there time just for a moment just to clarify something?
yes.
The self and the soul consciousness, because I don't want to miss this. This sounds very important, and I don't want to miss. If you could just say a couple words, Lotta Pen.
Yeah. Well, self means the soul conscious self. It's me. So when my soul consciousness, when I'm soul conscious, I am in myself, my real self. But when I'm upset, it's a part of me that carries a burden that blends in. And then I feel that upset, I feel that anger. So then I may react, and I can feel now I react like a policeman. Oh, now my police self is coming in and trying to fix everything and trying to tell other people to fix themselves. But it's a part of me that carries a burden, and the burden relates to trauma, probably many traumas. And I don't need to know those traumas. I could never know all my traumas. That's not the point. The point is to understand, all right, I have been through the mill, many things, I carry many burdens. And this pain have caused me to carry this shame. It has caused me to make many mistakes. So it's karma also. I mean, it's karmic, of course, but I'm not a bad person. And so I want to connect to myself. I want to be soul conscious, same thing. It's just a different way of playing with it. And then I can know how to deal with these other parts. But what I find is very helpful, I can start to get rid of all these ideas that I'm a bad person and I have this shame and I have to remember for all my life I did this, I did that. I cannot undo what I did. But when I look back and I've healed it, I can say, yeah, I did that. It's part of my shadow. But I'm not a bad person. We know the cycle. Baba has explained we were devils and deities, but we don't need to feel bad about it. It's part of the game. And so healing means it all feels okay.
Lovely.
So we're going to do a meditation, and I thought about something else now when I was having a break also, is that we talk about self and soul consciousness. And, I said not to be upset about egos. But you know what? It's never the self that is upset over the egos. So when we get upset with ourselves, it's parts fighting each other. So then it's inner polarization. And this is what we call when we are tense. Baba is saying often, don't have it, be attentive, don't have attention, don't be tense. And so this is very common to have fighting polarizations within us. So that is also one big reason for not being able to feel peace, because the different parts are opposing each other. So let's have a moment of meditation. And it's about getting to know a protector. And again, we can't force anything to happen. And so we are patient. So it's just a visit to our inner world through this method. And let's see what happens, what wants to happen. So first of all, make yourself comfortable and let your body relax. And then bring your attention to the present moment. And leave any other concerns aside for a little while. Just make yourself comfortable and allow yourself to feel safe. And then I invite you to do a scan of your body and your mind. So sense your body and your mind and note if there are any particular thoughts, emotions, sensations, or impulses that stand out. So I repeat, do a scan of your body and your mind and just note if there are any particular thoughts, emotions, sensations, or impulses that stand out. You can take your time. And as you do that, check and see if any of those impressions of thoughts and feelings or emotions or impulses seem to be calling out to you, as if anything in particular seemed to draw your attention. So I repeat, see if any of those thoughts or feelings or emotions or impulses seem to be calling out to you. So it can also be a physical feeling of tension or pain, whatever goes on. If anything in particular seems to draw your attention, and if so, then focus your attention on it exclusively for a minute and see if you can notice where it seems to be located in or around your body. And you may have a thought or a feeling and you can't locate it in or around your body, but you know the feeling or the thought, that's fine. It only helps when you can feel it in the body. It helps to know where to focus, but it's not a must. But this is usually how it's done. To locate whatever stands out to some point in the body or around the body. So it may also emerge as an image or something that you hear. And if you find something that stands out, notice how you feel towards it. Do you dislike it? Does it annoy you? Are you afraid of it? Do you want to get rid of it? Or do you depend on it? In this way, you are just noticing that you have a relationship with this thought, emotion, sensation, or impulse. If you feel anything besides a kind of openness or curiosity toward it, it means that another part is reacting and may not like it or be afraid of it. So if you feel anything besides a kind of openness and curiosity toward it, it means that another part is reacting. In that case, ask this other part to relax inside and give you a little space to get to know it without an attitude. It's like you ask this part that cannot relax to give a little space to step aside so you can connect to the original part. And you would feel that as an openness and curiosity in your heart. If you cannot get to that open and curious space, that is okay. It often does take time. And in that case, you could spend time with a part that doesn't want to relax, about its fear of letting you interact with the part that was drawing your attention. But if you can get into that open, relaxed, and curious place in relation to the part that you felt was calling out to you, then it is safe to begin to interact with it. It may feel a bit odd to you at this point, but just give it a try. And by that I mean, as you focus your attention on the thought, feeling, sensation, emotion, or impulse that you notice in this place, in your body or around your body, ask if there is anything it wants you to know, and wait for an answer. Do not think of an answer, but just silently wait for an answer. If you think of an answer, it means that a protector part, which is used to try figuring out problems beforehand, is interfering. So just wait silently with your attention focused on that place in your body until an answer comes. And if nothing comes, that's okay too. It just means that your part need more time to get to know you and feel safe. If you get an answer, then as a follow-up, you can ask what it is afraid of would happen if it didn't do this inside you. So your first question, you were asking if there is anything it wants you to know. And the second question, you would follow up and ask what it is afraid of would happen if it didn't do this, means what it's doing inside you. In other words, how it is protecting you. If it answers that question, You have probably learned something about how it is trying to protect you. And if so, try to see if you can extend some appreciation to it for at least trying to keep you safe. And see how it reacts to that appreciation. And then ask this part what it needs from you in the future. And when the time feels right, shift your focus back to the outside world and notice more of your surroundings. But also thank your parts for whatever they allowed you to do. And let them know that this is not their last chance to have a conversation with you, because you plan to get to know them even more. And then we can come back to the outside world completely. And then the idea was, if you would now like to have a little bit of time to have a conversation with Baba about whatever you discovered or didn't discover, or discovered that you didn't discover anything, whatever. Just share with Baba whatever is in your heart at this time. And if you found a protector, you could show Baba, look what I found in my inner world. And Baba will say, yeah, I knew all the time. So you have some time for your own reflection. And then if you would like to share. So how long time do you think, Judy, would be useful?
I think 8 or 9 minutes just writing on our own.
Yeah. And that's such that's why I think to understand that the inner world is a delicate ecosystem, I think it makes so much sense, because we can see with nature is such a delicate, nature is strong, but at the same time very delicate. And so then it makes me understand, oh, I shouldn't be disappointed if things don't just happen because I ask them to. It's like I have to win the trust of all my parts. And it takes time to get to know them, and that makes me relax also. It's like, instead of, oh, I'm not good enough, if it is maybe I don't have any parts because it's echoing silent. And in the beginning I was unsure about this, in the body or around the body, to feel them. But now it makes more sense to me why because I think we get to hear the message all the time, be bodiless, but it doesn't mean you don't feel anything in the body. So scanning the body is actually a good lead to connect to whatever wants to give a message to you. And it's so funny, because while I was doing the commentary, I became so aware of a helmet. I mean, I have a helmet on my head. And I realized, oh, someone is sitting there really holding on. So it became very physical. So I'm thinking, then Baba says, sometimes he used the word to burn sanskars, and then made me think, oh, so sanskars are not parts then. Then the sanskar is the burden. Because you don't burn your parts, but you burn the burden that the parts are carrying. And sometimes it says transform to original sanskars. Then I feel it's about the parts coming back to their true nature. And they are tired. Often he explains they are very tired. And if they get the job, if you ask them, what would you like to do instead? Well, they need to feel safe to let go of their part. If they feel I have to be the commander in chief here before, otherwise there'll be a major problem. But when they see that you solved something, and then you ask, and they get surprised. Often they get very surprised. They don't expect that. And then they get asked, what would you like to do instead? And then usually they want to do something completely different. So the inner critic often wants to be the cheerleader instead. So I like that idea when Baba says transformation and to transform parts. I think is beautiful. And I really think, the secret garden is like... is my inner paradise, and it will show outside, but paradise outside will only show when my paradise is reestablished inside. And to believe I really have the potential. And so slowly I have to help myself to let go of my identification with my traumas and my pains and my long story through Copper Age and Iron Age. And maybe that's why Baba asks us to spin the cycle. So we can disconnect with this identification with all the pain. And start to really remember that we belong to Golden Age.
Okay.